Try number 2. Take 2. So SDs and stimulus control. This is a closer look at what we're actually teaching. So let's review what we know about SDs. An SD is an instruction or signal that tells a person how to behave. SDs occur constantly in the natural environment. They're happening all the time. When you're using discrete trials to teach, we can thrive and present these SDs to our learners as part of a learning opportunity. So to use SDs effectively, when you give an SD, you should, number 1, get your learner's attention. This is kind of just common sense because, you know, if you were trying to have a conversation with someone and they weren't paying attention to you, you wouldn't get anywhere. Same thing, you're not going to get anywhere with your learner if they don't even know that you're giving the SD. And then you want to say it clearly and loudly enough for your learner to hear, and you want to say it only one time. So clearly and loudly enough, that means you just kind of say it in a salient way so that it's obvious that you did the SD, like touch your nose, or do this, or do this. And then you want to say it only one time. The reasoning for that is if you say, Courtney, come here. Come here. Come here. Courtney, come here. Then she comes over and you say like, okay, cool, good job, thank you for coming over. Really you reinforced coming over after 4. That was your SD. Your SD is come here, come here, come here, come here. And so you're going to pair those 2 behaviors together. So here's the more detailed technical definition. That's part of your RBT training. An SD is an antecedent stimulus that is associated with the availability of reinforcement for a certain behavior. So this might sound more complicated, but it simply means that when an SD is present, reinforcement is available or likely, and when an SD is not present, reinforcement is not available or not likely. So if you say, do this, and your learner does this, you're going to say, good job. If your learner just goes around clapping, you're not necessarily going to reinforce that. So here's some examples. A teacher saying, who was the first president, is the SD for saying George Washington. A student will only get the reinforcement in the form of the teacher saying correct for the behavior of saying George Washington in the presence of the question. If there's no question and the behavior happens, like a kid just randomly shouts out George Washington in class, I'm sorry, who are you? Like you're just gonna get strange looks. Another example, so if you're driving around late at night and you're hungry, when you see an open sign, a light on, and people inside a restaurant, that's an SD for the behavior of pulling over and going inside to eat. So the person is only going to get reinforcement of eating if these things are present. If they're not present, they're going to go inside and then they're not going to get reinforcement because the restaurant's closed. So an SD starts out as a neutral stimulus, but as a person experiences reinforcement in its presence and no reinforcement in its absence, the SD starts to influence the person's behavior. This is called stimulus control, when behavior occurs in the presence of an SD and not in its absence. So this is what we want with our instructions for our kids. We want when we say like, hey, come here, that alone influences their behavior because of a history with us. This is learned through natural experiences or, in our case, through direct teaching. So what does this mean for discrete trial teaching? When we're providing therapy, we're not just trying to teach the target response, we're training up the SD so that it evokes the behavior. So if you're trying to teach your kid to stomp, when you say stomp, and you're working on that instruction, you say stomp your feet, and then they do it. Stomp your feet, and then they do it. And then you say, cool, go have a break. You know, stomp, 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 stomp everywhere they go. That's not what you want to see. You want to see stomp when you say stomp. This is important later when we talk about prompting and prompt fading. And it's also important because of something called faulty stimulus control. So faulty stimulus control is the worst. So what happens is we have a stimulus that we want to be our SD for a certain behavior. So I want clap to be the SD for. And then we want that SD to evoke that behavior, the correct behavior. Faulty stimulus control happens when something else is controlling the behavior and not the SD we're trying to teach. So let's look at some examples and see how this can happen. So here's an example. this is your trial, and you say, touch triangle. And the kid touches the triangle. And then you do it again, and you say, touch triangle. Do you guys see an example of how this could be faulty stimulus control?
Color.
Yeah. So then you go, touch triangle. And then they do this. Because how are they supposed to know when you were here? You said touch triangle, but it's not like the shapes are all the same color. For all they know, they touched it and you said, yeah, that's correct. They could be responding to the fact that it's red. So we want the word and the shape, triangle, to control our kiddos' behavior, but really the word triangle and the color red are controlling behavior. So what would be the solution?
Make them all just black.
Yeah, like make them all the same color. Make the only difference be the shape. If you're trying to teach shape, the only difference should be shape. If you're trying to teach color, only difference is color. So what about here? You're trying to teach gender, and you say touch woman. What could be, what else? You want the word woman and the fact that it's a woman to control behavior, but what might actually be telling your learner how to respond? It could be that you could like,
or without the sand. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's like, well, this is a head. The picture looks different.
Right.
Like maybe they're responding. Maybe they think woman means beach, or maybe they think woman means standing up, or no, maybe they think woman means big head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe they think woman means that woman, rather than like general woman features, which are kind of hard to learn. What if you did, so say here we teach we call a kid has mastered a skill when they get it 80% correct for 3 days. So say you're trying to teach train and you use, these are your stimuli, so every day you pop them out and you say, touch train, and they start getting it right. They start touching train. When you say touch train, what's the problem there?
In this one, well, you've got like a live picture and you've got, well, one has the bunny has the square around it.
Right, there's other things, but like, and say this is your setup, like every day you pull out your plastic bag and it's this picture for you teaching train. You're trying to teach a kid to identify trains.
Oh, and okay, well, using the same train over and over again.
Yeah. You don't want, and this is like a cartoon train, which is true. You do want them to understand what a toy train is. You also want them to understand a real train, like different trains, Thomas the Train.
Right.
So you want to use more than one example of something that, if there's variety in real life, then you want to teach the same kind of variety. And then some of these are better with demonstrations, so I'm going to do one. Let's do, can you do this? What's the name? Pretend this So Courtney, we've been working on clap as the instruction. Like that's what we're working on. So like I'm gonna go play and then Courtney's gonna call me over to the table and then we'll start. Hannah, come sit.
Sorry, I wasn't listening. I don't know what we're doing.
Well, that's all you had to do. So like we're working on you were gonna say clap.
Yeah, but you did it before.
But I did it. So obviously what we want to be the SD, the word clap for this is not the SD. Like what is the SD?
Clap.
But what is being in the chair and like, yeah. Because a million times I came over and like maybe you give me candy when I clap, but I'm not paying attention to like you said the word clap and then I do it. I'm just like, oh, we're doing this again. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's not what we want, because that doesn't help our kid use that skill in real life. They're gonna go around and be like, in that sense, it's almost turned into like a request for whatever it is that you're giving me.
And also too, some of our kids, I have to like, it's one of my clients in particular memorizes the order in which they're presented.
Right.
So that's always like, don't do it in the order.
Yeah. Right, because it's listed on some of the programs and then
Because he
people
can,
don't.
as soon as you say clap, he knows that he has to like shake his head next. And you know what I mean?
Right.
Like he can go
Right.
through the whole routine.
You get that memory. And then it's just like the SD is you sitting there and something that he already learned.
Yeah.
What if I did like, and then sometimes this type of thing happens. What if we did this? This, I don't know if you can see, but this is a bat, a bike, and a ball. So what if you did touch bat? Touched it. Touch ball. Touched it. Touch bike. I don't know if you can really see over there, but I'm doing it every time it's the last one I put down.
Right.
So then they might learn like, oh, and like I catch myself doing that.
Yeah, don't favor a side.
Yeah, and that too. Some people do that. Like I've seen people, maybe you're working with, this kid's working on a bigger array, so they have like 9 pictures out, and it's like, touch bicycle, and it's in the middle. Like you're always picking the
Right.
one that's in the middle.
Yeah.
So stuff like that can make you think that your learner is learning, but really they're just doing what you did. And then what if you do this? So say, Courtney, this is the first time she's ever learned this, so I'm gonna prompt her for the first time. So I say like, touch bicycle. Oh yes, excellent. Touch bicycle. Yay! Touch bicycle. Woo woo! Touch bicycle. Yes! Touch bicycle. Yes! Touch bicycle. So, and then I go like this, and then I say touch bicycle, and she does that, but that's what I taught her to do. I taught her to touch
The one on
this
the
spot. Yeah. So to avoid that, you always want to rotate your pictures every trial. And then what if it's like this? And I was like, some of our kids have a program where it's like, where it is yes/no questions because we want them to answer those. So what if you say like, is this a phone? And they say no. I'm like, cool, good job. I'm like, is this a phone? Yeah, it is, good job. Is this my hand? No, it's not my hand. Is this my nose? And like, obviously, they're getting it from me. And yeah, that too. So yeah, that's another thing. If you have two correct options, like touch big, touch little, touch big, touch little, touch big, touch little, they just learn to do the opposite of what you said. Or if like this, the example I was doing, like they can get it from my SD, but the wrong part of my SD. Not that like, is this, and then the item, they're paying attention to like, she's nodding her head yes when it's yes. So like, is this a copy? Yeah, like I'm not intentionally doing it. Or sometimes you might be like, if you're holding them up instead for whatever reason, you're like, touch the bicycle.
Yeah.
Touch the ball. Touch the ball. touch the, what's this one? Touch the airplane. And then they just know the correct answer is where you looked. They're not learning what an airplane is or what a ball is. And then what if a lot of kids have programs where they're listening to instructions or responding to their name. So what if I say like, and when they say their name, they're supposed to look. So if I say like, Amanda, and then she looks, Amanda, and she looks, and I'm like, she knows her name, yes, and then I'm like, Bobby Ball, and she looks.
Yeah.
Like, Twin Cities, and she looks. So she's not learning her name, she's learning to respond to like that intonation. Yeah, doo-doo-doo, and she looks. What's another one? Sometimes if you say like, tell a kid it's lunchtime, and then you grab their lunch trash and say like, okay, go throw away your trash, and then they go throw it away, but they're responding to the context of the situation. Like when somebody gives me trash, I go do this with it. Or like I had a kid who I was trying to teach him come here, and so I would like sit him in a faraway chair or whatever and be like, come here, and he'd come, and he was doing really well. And then I sat him in the chair over there, and then I just like didn't say anything. Like,
Right.
so he wasn't responding to the words "come here." He was responding to, "This is what we're doing right now." Like, yeah. A lot of times too, with like, if you're doing actions with objects, like maybe roll car, the fact that the car is there tells them what to do. So that's why sometimes with some kids we need to like mass trial and repeat things over, but that's the danger when you repeat any type of skill over and over and over again. They stop attending to the SD and they start attending to just like, this is what we're doing. And also another one, sometimes when you if you have a puzzle, so say you have a 3-piece puzzle and then you give the puzzle and you're like, match, match, match. So the first one, that's a good trial because there's 3 options and they have to pick out of the 3. The second piece that you give them, now they're down to 2, so it could just be a guess. And then that third one is like they don't have to attend to the matching picture, they could just like pop it right into the only spot that's left. So really you got 1 good trial instead of 3. So those are some of those. So how do you prevent this? When you're first teaching a skill, if you're working on something like what we talked about, like shapes or colors or something like that, or big, small, you want to use stimuli that only differ with respect to the feature that you're trying to teach. So if you're trying to teach color, these things should only be different in the color. Or if you're trying to teach big and little, they should be the exact same thing. One is big, one is little. Eventually we do want to teach like, here's an elephant and here's an ant, and say which one is big, and they can do that, but at first it might be confusing. You want to rotate your field like we talked about. You don't want to ever just like leave them there and let them touch the same spot over and over again, because they're not going to be paying attention to what you're actually trying to teach them. And just general, open your eyes, just be aware of it. This is not necessarily stuff that you're going to be creating or like usually the stimuli is there for you, but you do want to just be aware of it so that when you talk to the behavior consultant, you can say like, hey, I think they're actually doing this. They're getting all these pluses and we're about to master this program, but I don't think they actually have it. So you're actually a fabulous resource when it comes to this, because you're going to be the person in the best position to see this stuff. And then in general, you want to use a variety of stimuli. So when you do your trials, your stimuli is already made for you. They're all in a cabinet. However, the important thing to do is you want to practice these skills in real life, like while you're on your breaks, while you're on your rotations, which are like social skills or things that we do in groups, and when you go on community outings. So if you're teaching to identify objects, and the objects in your set of pictures are like a pillow, a train, an airplane, when you're in the apartment, you want to get the pillow and say like, hey, what is this? Just to double check it. And when you're in the community, you want to be like, hey, what do you see up in the air? An airplane. To test like, can you really identify these things in the community, besides the fact that it gives really good practice for the kid. So discrimination training, most of what you're going to be doing involves discrimination training. Discrimination training means that you're teaching someone when to do a behavior, not necessarily which behavior to do. So how did the S get its D in an SD? So they start out as neutral, which we mentioned this before. Like with that restaurant, if you're an alien coming to the planet and you've never been to a fast food restaurant at 2 in the morning after an evening out, then you're going to go rolling up to McDonald's when it's solely closed, when other people who've experienced this situation don't do that. So it involves 2 settings or antecedents and 1 behavior, because you're just trying to teach when we do that behavior. And then in 1 setting or antecedent, like circumstance, you get reinforcement, and in the other one you don't. So let's look at some real life examples. So you work for a hotel, and then there's these like quarterly inspections that come from the bigger company that owns the hotel. And so the behavior is going to talk to your boss, maybe ask them for a favor, ask them how you're doing on something. And so when you do it, the circumstance number 1 is you talk to her right after a quarterly inspection and you get out of here. not happy, they're grouchy, and they don't, respond in a reinforcing way to whatever it is you're trying to tell them. And then when you do it other times, you get nice, sweet, friendly boss. So what happens to your behavior in the presence of the quarterly inspection? It'll stop. And then what happens to the behavior of talking to your boss at other times? You keep going. You still do it. So the quarterly inspection has become almost like the other times have become an SD for like, talk during this time, don't do it this time. What about the behavior is telling jokes. So if you're telling a dirty joke and you're in front of your grandmother, you get this response. I'm not going to be happy. And then if you tell, the other setting is in front of your friends, and it's like good times. So what's going to happen to telling dirty joke behavior in front of grandmother? Decrease. And then what's going to happen to telling dirty jokes in front of your friends? Increase or keep doing it. So now the friends have become an SD for tell me dirty jokes, I'll laugh, I'll give you reinforcement. Potty training is another example. So the two settings are you're in your clothes, and the other one is you're in the bathroom on the toilet for when to do the behavior. The behavior's going to the bathroom because it's one behavior, two settings. So in your clothes, this is what happens. Not fun for anyone involved.
She doesn't really like that.
She was a little too upset.
Did I spill something?
And if you go in the toilet, especially if you're in the middle of potty training, it's like, woohoo! Pee to the potty! Like, lose your mind. So what's going to happen to going in your clothes for most kids, hopefully? Stop. And to going in the toilet, it increases. And that's the potty training process. That's basically what it is. And there's you get, other social maybe punishment that comes with this, like from your parents. And then maybe you get a treat for going in the potty, but it's basically like one works, one doesn't. So this is an example for something you'd be doing with actually this is also an example for typically developing kids, but also for our kids. So the behavior is touching. And this is kind of weird to understand, but one setting is touching the red object, and then the other setting is the blue object. They're really just stimuli in front of you. They're not really different settings, but think of them as this is one stimulus, this is another, and your mom says, oh, which one's the red one, baby? And then if you touch the red, you get lovey mommy time, which is what happens when kids are interacting with their parents, and it's like, show me the bunny. And then if you touch blue, you get like, no, that's not red. And then this is an example of what we might do with our kids, because on community outings we're trying to work on safety. So the behavior is crossing the street. So say you're going on an outing and this kid loves the outing, like they're excited to get in the car. You're like, we're going to Kentucky Kingdom. So you approach the street. One setting is no cars coming, and the other setting is cars coming. So when there's no cars coming and your kiddo tries to cross, you let them cross, and they get the reinforcement of getting in the car. When there are cars coming and your kiddo tries to cross, you say, nope, let's try that again, and you make them go back, and you see. So what's going to happen to the behavior of crossing the street when there's no cars coming? It should hopefully increase. And then the behavior of crossing the street when there are cars coming is going to decrease, because it's like that punishment of having to go back and like waste more time, and you could have just waited.
That was the best. But the reason I paused there is I was like, they're going to look both ways.
Yeah, that's assuming assuming your kid already knows that, and you're just kind of working on like fine-tuning it. So another example is eloping from the table. A lot of the kids that she'll work with, especially maybe in building B, are like kind of squirmy and squiggly, like the kid that you saw in the before and after discrete trial video, and they will try to run away from where you're working with them. So we have two settings, two therapists. One is therapist Trish, and the other one is therapist Eleanor. So when therapist Trish is working with the kid and they elope from the table, the kid they run to the trampoline and they bounce. So that's what happens. And then when they're working with therapist Eleanor, they run away from the table and Eleanor says, and just pulls them back, catches them in time, and works. So what do you think will happen with running with Trish?
She did it all the time.
Yeah, it's like, cool, now I know how to get away from you. And then with therapist Eleanor, what will happen with running? Yes. So in this is kind of important to note because in this case, the person themselves is the SD. So, and that's what you're going to see with your kids and yourself. You're going to actually become an SD for their behavior. So to review, when you're running trials, you're not just teaching the behavior, you're teaching the behavior in response to the SD. So if you ever see like that, what Courtney and I did where I just clapped when I showed up to the table, that's not a good sign. That means you're not teaching them what you are trying to teach them. So basically you just want to watch out for this and communicate with your team and communicate with your behavior consultant if you notice it happening and you want to do those strategies to prevent it. Like practicing in the real environment is probably the best thing you can